I think this part of Australian history is going to be studied for generations to come. It's going to be the perfect textbook on how to set yourself on fire when you're already drowning. Now, if you didn't see today, the Liberals have finally done it under their leader, Susan Ley. They have officially torched their own climate policy, drowned their net zero ambitions, and handed the microphone straight to the National Party in what we can only describe as the tail wagging the dog. The junior partner is now running the show. The so-called party of business and stability has turned itself into a cosplay convention of denialists and culture warriors. And who did the National Party send to negotiate this historic act of political seppuku?
Australians deserve affordable energy and responsible emissions reduction. To keep faith with that commitment, the Liberal Party will remove a net zero target from our policy. And if elected, we will remove the 43% 2030 target and its net zero by 2050 target from the Climate Change Act.
Well, of course, it was their best man, their tactical genius, their secret weapon, Matt Canavan, a man who loves to cosplay as a coal miner but not be really good at anything else. Now, reports are saying that he was the one who persuaded them to ditch net zero. And if this is true, the Liberals really will just fall for anything. The headlines will try and soften this, right, as a win for the average Aussie punter. You're going to see numbers like 1/3 of Australians do not support net zero. It sounds really ominous, right? It sounds like a rising tide of public rejection. Except it's something that the coalition is really good at, which is being bad at basic numbers. 1/3 against means 2/3 support. Imagine building your entire political strategy on the premise that the overwhelming majority is just wrong. If they want to fling themselves into the abyss of political nothingness, I don't know how they can do a better job. Anthony Albanese is already sitting on a 1,000-year mandate with 94 seats from the last election. The coalition needed a credible policy to claw back relevance, and what they've delivered is just this political suicide note. But while they obsess over their own internal bullshit, and while the media hyper-focuses on who stabbed who in the front, what is not being talked about is the real scam here. These guys are robbing you, the punter, of a functioning opposition. Every good government needs someone breathing down its neck in order to hold them accountable. Instead, we have a coalition that is trying to outflank one nation because they got a sudden boost in the polls. They're trying to pretend that climate science is just a vibe and that can be negotiated. Even Matt Canavan, the master of intellectual powerhouse that he is, admits that climate change is still real, but he's very funny with his numbers. The timing could not be better for the fossil fuel lobby. This is an industry that has known the writing on the wall since the 1970s, had the opportunity to diversify and expand their businesses into other areas, but now instead of being responsible and protecting our planet, they're just going to do another culture war. Now that the Liberals have intentionally set themselves adrift from mainstream voters, the astroturf is being rolled out. Now get ready for an avalanche of manufactured outrage and creative accounting from the usual suspects. People like Gina Reinhardt, the Institute of Public Affairs, Advance Australia, and of course, Ben Fordham. Speaking of Ben Fordham, he was the first out of the gate this morning, enthusiastically announcing that 90% of Australia's power comes from fossil fuels. A statistic spoon-fed to him by a group funded by the coal industry, which is the Institute of Public Affairs.
Australia's long been told we're on the path to clean energy, but when you look at the full picture, that story doesn't hold up. Believe it or not, almost 90% of all the energy Australia uses still comes from coal, gas and oil. Almost 90%. The Institute of Public Affairs has analysed the figures and says hundreds of billions of dollars is being spent on net zero, along with all the media and political hype, but wind and solar remain a blip on the energy radar.
He left out the small detail, though, that this month, Australia officially hit 50% renewables on its electricity grid for the first time in history. Not a minor footnote, not a rounding error, but the single most important sign that the country is already transitioning, whether the coalition has a tantrum or not. This is the death throes of a literally fossilised industry, and you're going to see every single dirty tactic rolled out. Fear campaigns, fake grassroots groups, and all sorts of fake public backlash. Suddenly, you've got all of these experts who turned out to be sponsored by mining companies, or an 18-year-old boy who just happens to be the voice of nuclear for Australia. All of this is designed to convince Australians that the cheapest and fastest growing sources of energy in this country and the world are somehow dangerous and not efficient. Let's bring back Matt Canavan, right? The man who became a senior advisor to KPMG and Barnaby Joyce's ex-chief of staff somehow wants you to believe that he is the only one in the country to have secret evidence proving that renewables cost more. His most recent intellectual revelation is the sentence, "The cost of doing nothing is avoiding the cost of doing it."
What would it cost Australia to drop the net zero target, to get rid of net zero? What's the cost?
To drop net zero. Well, there's obviously in that question there's the cost of it. The calculation is what is the cost of getting to net zero, because the cost of dropping it is the benefit of avoiding those costs.
Okay, some of your colleagues were expecting you to do modelling as part of this review. Has that happened?
Look, we hope to do some of that work. Obviously, in the time we've had, that hasn't been done just yet. That's an extensive exercise.
It's the kind of insight that you might get from a dollar store fortune cookie. Let's talk about costs really quickly, right? Australia's coal and gas stations are very old. They are currently at the end of their lifespan and need replacing. So we either have a choice: build new coal and gas-fired power stations, or invest in a technology which is proven to be cheaper and easier to roll out. What about nuclear? We don't have the luxury of sitting around for 15 years while we wait for the gas cartel to keep ripping us off, while they send our gas to Japan to sell it for cheaper over there than we can buy it as Australians. The absurdity of all this is insane. They're not even trying to tackle the problem. It's more culture war bullshit. Even if you deal with the state bans and the regulatory systems in place, the insurance issues and the communities who want nothing to do with it. I don't think Muswellbrook wants a nuclear power station. We have so many farmers upset about the wind farms and the blight on the landscape. But imagine putting a nuclear power plant there. Time and time again, nuclear energy is the most expensive energy generation on the planet. Renewables plus storage are the cheapest. This is not an ideology. This is what the International Energy Agency says, right? And also the CSIRO. This is what our own market operator says in this country. The Nationals are not just ignoring this, they are actively sabotaging the future economic opportunities of their own communities, which they pretend to represent. Who stands to benefit the most from an energy transition? It's regional Australians. Farmers can diversify their income, towns can attract new industries, transmission infrastructure can bring long-term investment into rural communities.
Hughenden is no stranger to renewables. Over 15 years ago, Wind Lab put the idea of renewable energy to the small town of Hughenden. Since then, they've created a world first.
So this was all grazing land, so cattle grazing.
But it was a novelty when they first went up to see, to come up here and see turbines on the horizon. But like since the years have gone by, you don't notice them anymore. They're just part of the landscape now, you really don't.
Meanwhile, the weather events hitting rural areas are becoming more and more extreme. Droughts are longer, floods are more violent, and crop yields are swinging wildly. Decline climate reality does not keep these communities safe. It leaves them exposed. What is happening in the coalition is now not strategy, it is regression. The party that once prided itself on economic discipline has turned into a mouthpiece for the fossil fuel industry. And while there is some sort of certain schadenfreude in watching these guys kick themselves while they're down, the truth is the clown shoal will not collapse in isolation. It will be funded, bolstered and amplified by media barons with deep investments in fossil fuels. Millions will be poured into disinformation campaigns by a group like Advance Australia and the usual network of industry-backed think tanks. Just look at the last election, we've got plenty of stories of this on the Michael West website. The coalition thinks that it is playing a clever long game by throwing red meat to their rabid right-wing base. What it has actually done is just hand over the entire agenda to the National Party, a supposedly minor party that represents about 2% of the population and 100% of the culture war bullshit in this country. The Liberals have become passengers in their own car, and the driver is a man in a high-vis cosplay outfit, yelling that the sun does not make electricity. Australia deserves better. We should expect better from our politicians. We need a functioning opposition, a credible climate policy, and a political class that can count beyond 1/3. Instead, we get this death spiral disguised as leadership. It's likely that Susan Lane will not make it to the next election. She's probably going to get replaced by some sort of culture warrior, talking about Australian jobs and manufacturing, even though we haven't done that in 30 years in this country. The coalition is a bloody joke, but without a good opposition, no government can thrive. This is the real cost of ditching net zero, not just the climate, but the democracy itself.